Okay, hi YouTube, this is Jess Allen, and I'm here with Eric and, I'm sorry, what was that? Doug, and Eric, and I caught them here in the park, here in Seattle, and they're both playing guitars, and so they're musicians, and I thought that I would love to hear their input on a couple of these pressing issues that we all are dealing with here as Americans. First of all, what are your guys' opinion on 9/11, but more specifically the subsequent losses in our civil rights and our personal privacy, having to do with the Patriot Act, Victory Act, all those, where they basically give the government the right to tap all of our phone, internet communications without any kind of warrant or anything, and to take that data and basically build, some kind of profile on people who are not really doing anything wrong. Do you guys have any opinion on some of that stuff that's been going on?
Well, I guess I've never personally... It's hard to say whether anyone has personally experienced this sort of thing, since we don't exactly know how we're being monitored.
Right.
For example, I don't feel as though I'm being put at any disadvantage, or I'm being taken advantage of personally, or my rights are being infringed upon.
Right.
But I don't feel that way because I don't know what our government has done and what our government is doing.
Sure.
In terms of monitoring the way we communicate and things like that.
Because there's just so many questions.
There's absolutely, to me, there's a lot of blanks that haven't been filled in.
Sure.
And I mean, there's also, I don't know, I feel like in order to figure out what it exactly is and has been going on,
right,
we need to ask a lot of questions and get a lot of right answers. And it's not that I feel that these questions haven't been asked. I feel as though the answers to them have not been made available to the widespread public. So I don't think people such as myself honestly don't know what the hell's going on.
Yeah, so. I think a lot of us feel like that, where we're kind of, we're given certain bits of information and we're told, well, because of these bits of information, which were not even complete in the first place, that then because of this we need to do this and this in response. Some people are calling it problem, reaction, solution, basically, that they, the government, in one way or another, either provide or create a problem and then wait for the public to have the reaction of something must be done, and then they offer the solution to the problem which they have covertly created.
Kind of bait and switch type thing.
Yeah, and another thing, which just to add a little tidbit to that, there has been a lot of independent researchers that have taken upon themselves to research the events of 9/11, and among them there is a coalition basically of architects and engineers that have basically signed a petition, which I believe they've got a few thousand names at least already, to be delivered to the White House, that basically states that from all of their years of experience, and we're talking combined, of all these people's years of 20 years, 30 years of architectural engineering experience, that these guys basically say that no high-rise skyscraper building with a steel frame such as the towers had has ever fallen due to fire alone or a jet impact alone. And in fact, the architect of the World Trade Center complex actually came out and said that they designed the buildings to withstand multiple 747 jet impacts. Point being, basically, that the people who really know the most about architecture are, and these aren't conspiracy theorists, these are people who have worked their whole careers in architecture, are kind of coming out and saying that, no matter what, not necessarily saying, hey, this is the president or anyone behind it, that's not what they're saying, but rather that, that there's something that's being left out, there's some information we're not being told.
I don't know if I would agree with the conspiracy theory type people, out there.
Yeah.
But I do believe there are things that are unexplained, and there are things that have not been answered by our government.
Sure.
One explanation I've heard as to how those buildings could have fell after the fires,
Right.
Because apparently fire couldn't have burned hot enough or something to melt the mortar and steel or what have you in the towers, and that's what some people point to as like foul play on behalf of the government. But one explanation I've heard is always been that all of the synthetic materials and everything that were in the towers, when they ignited and caught on fire and began to burn, things like carpet and other plastics and stuff like that, the temperature of that stuff burning, from what I've heard, was enough to bend the steel, melt the steel, stuff like that. That's the explanation I've heard. But
I'm familiar with that theory as well, and the only other little factoids, I guess, that I'd want to throw out there to you is just from my research. What they've said is that is a condition that plays into how it could have came down. But the couple other things that people have really pointed to as being the main biggest questions is one that apparently from all the architects and engineers and even the ones that designed the World Trade Center, I believe, I can't remember the guy's name, but one of the architects said that basically if anything like, say, a massive heat had caused the collapse, that what you would have seen is even if the whole outer building did collapse, that there would have been basically like an internal steel skeleton structure that would have still stayed intact, and that basically would have been jutting up out of ground zero, so several hundred feet in the air, and that yet what we found at ground zero was actually that those big core columns that I'm referring to were actually had diagonal, is that how you would say diagonal? Yeah, diagonal slanted cuts. So basically the structure that was found still intact had these slanted cuts in the steel, which people who do controlled demolitions were actually commenting on that, saying that that's basically exactly what you would see at the buildings where they brought them down. The one other thing is, what's his name? Yeah, a guy named James Fetzer actually found, he was able to obtain small samples of the dust from ground zero, and basically what he found that was most upsetting and unsettling is that there was high remnants of a high explosive compound called thermite, and apparently this compound, to my knowledge, is really a highly controlled explosive that is only the U.S. military has access to it. So the real troubling thing is that those facts and a few others, and the fact that the people who the guys who actually did the 9/11 Commission report, I believe it's like 6 out of the 10 of them have stepped forward and said that basically they were not allowed to see certain things, they were not allowed to fully investigate. And that basically they kind of feel like it was a sham. And then, of course, real quickly, the only other two things that must be said is that George Bush's brother, Jeb Bush, was put in control of the security for the World Trade Center about 2 weeks before the towers were brought down.
I've heard something about that.
And then Larry Silverstein, the owner of the complex, took out something like a $10 billion, maybe not that big, but $billion insurance policy on the complex, something like a month or 6 weeks before.
I've also heard that, yes.
Yeah, and then, what was the other thing? And then most importantly, that we've never got any kind of explanation about Building 7. Building 7 was not hit by a plane, and in fact, the remnants of the tower from it collapsing only damaged the outside of the building enough to start a few light fires, and yet on the same morning it came down in the exact same fashion, straight down, in the form of what most people would call a controlled demolition. So really the biggest question most people come up with is that Building 7 wasn't hit by a plane, there was no previous damage, and yet it came down in the same morning. So basically, we have those issues, it just seems like the mainstream media has halted the debate. They just don't want people to get any further with talking about it, or they'll brand you a conspiracy theorist if you keep asking.
There's a tendency what do you think about this?
I mean,
Can you pause that one second? I want to start a new